podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. So me and Majestic are about to get into it around Reservation Dogs and a little bit of Puffy. A little bit of Puffy and Jermaine Dupri on the back end. So thank you for listening, and let's go. Peace. I'm Majestic.
Justice Rajee, my man.
Hey, what's happening, man? So, well, I'm just going to get into it. So this week I wanted to start off. There's a show on Hulu. It's called Reservation Dogs, from the co-creators, executive producers, Sterlin, Harjo, and Taika Waititi. I'm not familiar with other works by Sterlin Harjo, but Taika Waititi, if you are a fan of the Marvel Universe and if you enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, that's Taika Waititi. And also he got some other good, product out there. Is he about I know another movie about, but I might not be that movie, but you know what I'm saying? He's I like that guy. And I enjoyed Sterlin production there too. Basically it's a half-hour comedy that talks about the exploits of 4 Indigenous teenagers in rural Oklahoma. I'm reading this from the show description, so just so the world knows. Who rob, steal, and save in order to get to exotic, mysterious, faraway land of California. And I just wanted to add on about it for a second because it's one, it's a good show. It's just funny. It's entertaining. It's enlightening. But also the thing that really struck me, and I was able, I think it's only 8 episodes in this first run. And I think I'm gonna take a swing, but I think in my lifetime, in terms of a show that the central figures and primary figures were all Indigenous community members, I don't recall it ever happening.
Right.
To my knowledge, at least not on any network that we would consider, what's prime time now, but at least something where you could access it easily and it would be featured and it's yo, this show is on and what have you. And I thought it was so I think it's a pretty dope little sort of step in, to that world, that community. If you ever been to Oklahoma, and then living out here in the West, we grew up, you got all the names and the words and the names of streets and the names of areas and things that let you know the indigenous past of the area, but you may or may not see the people.
Right.
You know what I mean? To the same degree or level, unless you are some way situated, positioned where you have that connection. I grew up close to, reading basically across the highway from the Rancocas reservation, which wasn't a very large reservation, but it was actually a reservation there. And I went to a powwow there a couple times in my youth. But I think that was probably an outlier for New Jersey. I don't think and I'm almost positive that there's people who I grew up with who didn't really recognize. There's a reservation over there. Yes, it's right over there. It's
right.
If you don't go on 295 and you go over, there's a sign for a state park, and there's another sign, and that sign there's a reservation there. But in any event.
No, I think just to your point, I think the East Coast experience around Native populations is an interesting one, especially for those of us, for Black folks, right? Because if you're Black on the East Coast, you're talking about somebody in your family that was Native, right? Usually somebody from somewhere in North Carolina or some variation of something that was a native, and that person in your family, and you show pictures of that person, and you be trying to guess who's black and guess who's not, right? We got that in our community. Like, guess who's black and guess who's Indian, right? Which has its own complications to it. Then you, like you said, you have all these streets that are named for indigenous and native people, right? Without seeing them, right? And then you have, I won't go deep into this, but then you have the other part of the side of people in your family, which is people, talking about their status as native people and kind of that whole space, right? So I think on the East Coast level, you're right in that there's like this, it has this almost like mystical quality, right? It doesn't have like I've met somebody, right? Except again, somebody's grandmother or somebody's great uncle, right? Who had long hair, and that we use it as proof that like they were Indian, right? Or the, always present, especially when we were younger, somebody got Indian in their family because their hair frame, the hair is different, and so let's just get this out the way here. Yeah. That doesn't mean anyone in your family was native, because Black folks, their hair can be different. You know what I mean? I just want to give an alert for everybody listening. Black folks' hair can be different. You don't have to be indigenous. You don't have to be Puerto Rican. You don't have to be Cuban. You don't have to be from the Indian subcontinent for your hair grade to be different. Right.
A variety of textures and forms.
Yeah, like let's just, you know what I mean? Let's just, people can show up differently. Interestingly, well, I'll say is there was a brother who was in my childhood, actually, interesting. He was full-blooded native. But because he lived in the African American community, it was just like he's native, but kind of like, so what? And not in a negative way, but kind of like one of those like, oh, he's native. Yeah, cool. That's brother. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's it. And then his children were Black and native, right? Because their mother identified as Black. So, and they were just kids, right? Like, so you do have that kind of, meshing I think on the East Coast in different ways than you would in the Midwest and in the West, where it's just a different cultural history, right? So just to add on to, I think where you're from frames also kind of how you understand the indigenous population, besides like the obvious genocide and erasure.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, actually erasure is one of the places I'd like to start, because I think the thing that sometimes our community, entertainment is one of the lanes where we have had, not always the opportunity to be represented well, but one of the lanes where we have not faced as much restriction to be engaged. And then over time, and I'm sure folks that work in entertainment can, so we'll tell you, we ain't there yet, depending on how you feel about the recent Emmys. But the idea that, we have a pretty, at this point, ubiquitous presence, you know what I'm saying, and all the, especially in television, entertainment, and other things, they got shows, I guess as an analogy that some would get, currently in the NFL, I think it's like 10 or 11 Black quarterbacks that I think are almost starting. And most of them, there's a bunch of them that ain't necessarily good. They just all right, which is an achievement, because usually in the past, you was Black quarterback, you had to be fucking awesome. Like you didn't get to play. Like you couldn't be a journeyman backup Black quarterback.
The ability to be mediocre. There's a weird thing in American society where the ability to be mediocre means you've made it.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So like to the degree now, like, there's gripping Black dramas where it's like, oh shit, it's ill. It's around Black characters. And and then there's these, what they call them, the multi-cast member dramas where there's a couple Black people and there's some other people and these other cultures. You know what I'm saying? Like, we kind of got a widespread. Now there's definitely, room for better, room for more, but I would say from what's his name, Insecure to what's the joint on you got Black Lightning, you know what I'm saying? You got Hero, Black people.
I mean,
there's a lot
to your point, to the point where we're able to have horrible black shows like Tyler Perry's The White House. I don't know if you've ever seen that shit, but that shit's horrible.
I've heard about it. I ain't seen
that shit is, man, this shit is horrible, man. Like, if the ubiquity of mediocrity is any indicator that you've made it, then we have made it, because that shit is horrible, man. My vantage point on Tyler Perry has shifted over time. You know what I mean? I acknowledge I've had some growth around what I understood as his perspective and, the messages and the way that he went about his business. Mm-hmm. And I honor him as an artist again. But the idea of, you made it when you can be mediocre, mean we didn't made it. That's trash. And anybody watch it, if anybody sees it and don't think it's trash, please call up or hit Justice or hit me and say, hey, it wasn't trash. Because we can debate that. We can do Kevin Samuels. We'll get you on the line and I will argue you down. I will argue you down like Kevin Samuels argue people down. That nigga, man.
Tell me about that plot point. Why are the bad people dark skinned in this show?
I watched Kevin Samuels yesterday, man. He's the wildest guy in the world, man. Anyway, go ahead. My fault.
Indeed. We got this. At some point, we need to circle and talk about that as a cultural phenomenon. Maybe not today, but and so what I was pointing to is like we could take for granted the idea that like a show is on TV. It touches base with something in your community, and FX as a network kind of like Friends, does like kind of surrealist stuff. So, you think about, I'm a big fan of of Atlanta, and the show's, definite touch on Blackness, but then also a surreal, kind of a surrealist feel. But, do you get these things that make you laugh, but also it's like, oh shit, that's serious. That's like serious ass issue you just touched based on. And like I said, I don't think there's any. I don't recall having the opportunity in this format to watch any shows, especially comedic, because usually in America we want to take, you want to have the gripping drama about the Indigenous community, which I could imagine, similar to how sometimes we're like, yo man, can't we have some fun and laugh at some shit? Like every time you put us on TV, it's a damn, you put that downtone music, like at a very special episode of 48 Hours, you know what I'm saying? Or like in a serious session of SVU, you know what I'm saying? And then you talk about us, and it's like, nah, man, like sometimes we, for whatever hardships and tough things that are part of our lives, we have fun too. You know what I'm saying? And I think the show, for me, I feel like we got a little bit, of an entryway into a community. And at least from what I've been able to filter, right? So I have, a couple different, social media lenses and people that I follow that I've seem to be, on point, contact points with that community. Is that within the community, it's like, yeah, this is touching base on stuff that we understand. You know what I'm saying? And I think I just think it's dope. You know what I mean? And I think it's a good thing. Just as a baseline. The other thing that so I guess my first question to you is what was just some of your thoughts of the show itself, or what you've seen, or anything that's come to your mind about it?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, just to add on regarding the erasure conversation, because I do think that's important versus someone always presenting you negatively, just not presenting you. Right? Like there's a difference with somebody trying to actively use television to destroy you, which I would argue has been done to Black folks continuously, and sometimes still is, versus beyond negative depictions in 1960s television shows or early 70s television shows, just an erasure of the fact that there are millions of a people. Right. And I mean, to some degree, you do also see it. It's less maybe a little bit with the Latino world, and acknowledging, as we've talked about before, that Cubans in New York and Mexicans in, California often culturally are as different as the world can be. They just they both speak Spanish and they tend to be Catholic, right? So obviously trying to paint all that community in one is difficult in itself. But it's even different than that, right? I think it's more just like we're just going to act like this group of people don't exist because, to your point earlier, to the vast majority of people in America, indigenous people don't exist, right? Besides cities where there are large urban native populations like Minneapolis, you know what I mean? You know, the Twin Cities and other places in kind of like that Midwest area where you have just like large populations of native communities. They don't exist to people. So TV is not going to show you a conversation about a people who quote unquote don't exist to you, right? Which is one of the challenges of using media and using paid television as a means for representation, right? Because there's no reason for someone in New York to think about the native population any more than it is for someone in LA. They're going to think about Black folks. They're going to think about, you know, the Chicano population out there. You know, they're just going to have a different conversation, right? So I think that this was good. And then one thing that's important is that this was done on the terms of Native people talking about Native people. And I think that's also a place where, and unique about the show, very similar to ATL, is this idea of we're going to talk about ourselves honestly, right? Like we're not trying to present something to you. This isn't the Budweiser Kings of Africa, Kings and Queens of Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and shout out to Budweiser Kings and Queens of Africa for all they did for us in the 80s. I ain't trying to knock it. I enjoyed it. And still enjoy it. And still enjoy when I see the Hannibal poster.
I see the Hannibal poster, man. I get a little warm spot right in my heart.
Yeah, you get a little warm spot. You remember when somebody had a six pack? Somebody family with a six pack and brought back, you know what I mean, showing you, you know, Queen Hepzibah, you know what I mean, in antiquity.
My teacher had that up in school. Like that was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if you're a certain age, you Black, you just but why the Kings and Queens of Africa? Like, you know what I mean? So, you know, but I think they just told a real story, right? They told an authentic story, which in some ways is the most freeing because they can see themselves and they can present themselves saying, yeah, here's what's going on, but here's the tension between Native medicine and the clinic. Right? Like, let's have this conversation where the you know, say the Native medicine folks will sit up in front of the health clinic and say, don't go over there, buy our stuff.
Right, get some of this. Get some
but then you ask them for something, and say, no, we won't have nothing for that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the ironies of it and how I think they bring to bear the ironies. Another thing I quickly wanted to say was the power of even looking at, you know, the reservation and the reservation being a multiracial place, which again, I think, you know, America doesn't comprehend. Like we might not comprehend that there are places where it's a mostly Native population and there are Black folks there too.
Right.
Or a mostly Native population, because again, we have the conversation, especially in Oklahoma, about, you know, Black natives, right? And it's just all is there, right? And the whole complicated history of the Trail of Tears and what Oklahoma represented for, you know, Native tribes and Native, you know, that brought slaves with them and the complications of that, right? I mean, there's a lot written, there's a lot wrapped up there, right?
Yeah.
But just even having white folks there, having any kind of folks there, just showing that even in this community, you're having this almost like multicultural the way they present even the Black characters or white characters, or, you know, so I just think that that's a really, really important and powerful part of how they are using media to give an authentic, nuanced story.
Yeah. And, you know, the other piece that was striking me again, like if you ever been to Oklahoma, I think it's actually filmed, you know what I'm saying, Oklahoma. It's not filmed in, you know, I don't know, Toronto or something, saying it's Oklahoma or
right,
you know,
right.
Some, I mean, not that they're, you know, it's like Oklahoma is a very Oklahoma place. I've been to Oklahoma a couple times for work, and got, you know, one of the times stayed on the western band of Cherokee at the, I want to say that was at a school we stayed at. Some kids, I think it was school, and it has a feel, right? And it is the degree to which our society, wants to sort of not let you know how places feel, or like, you
That's
see
right.
things, like when I've been watching, slid back and watching The Wire again, and when you see the Baltimore row houses, like Baltimore row houses ain't like they're very similar to Philadelphia row houses or Trenton row houses or Camden row houses, but they ain't the same. It's like it feels like Baltimore. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like there's something to, New York feels like New York. Like you can't fake Harlem. If you say you a movie in Harlem or a show in Harlem or stories in Harlem, and you probably can fake a little bit, you know what I mean? But you can't fake it overall. Like at some point, if you really want me to feel like this is happening in Harlem, like I need to see some Harlem things.
Well, you can't fake it in a serious undertaking, right?
Yeah,
like if you really want this to be, like you're saying, if it's serious, if it's like, everybody hates Chris or something, right? Yeah. That's fine. You filmed it in California. We get that, right?
Yeah, put on set. It's all good.
Yeah. So it's all good. That's where you did it. But if like you wanted to have some heft and some density, you have to do that. And I will say, watching it, and even the framing of the sparseness and, of the kind of distance between folks and all that kind of stuff, and the walking, and just from talking to people who have had that experience, saying like that is extremely authentic to how it is, right? Which, to your point, I think gives us an insight, right? However fleeting, of like, here's a lifestyle that people are living, right? Here's this idea that people are living here and think about going somewhere else. And like, but why they're trying to get out, and that's not to denigrate that place, but it's, I think when you see it appropriately, then it adds some credibility to the story of like, here's why this four group of young people want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I appreciate that the show engages like serious community, societal issues. I mean, you talk about the health clinic, you know what I'm saying, and the old heads out front, like I said, with the traditional methodologies, and then inside, like when they go in, first everybody's at the clinic, right? Like it ain't just the indigenous community, not just the native community, it's other folks. And when I've places where I've engaged or had that opportunity, like that be the case. It'd be services that it ain't just like it's the clinic that's around here. You know what I mean? Right. So you might think from like a social infrastructure perspective that like, and sometimes I would say in our community we might opine to this idea of like, yeah, and it's just ours. And it's like, well, yeah, but then if you about health, you probably gonna serve whoever's around. Like you ain't just like, oh no, hey brother, you got to wait. We got other people in. But then, when the system goes up and they like, what's my man? He's like, they can't find his information, and like, oh no, hold on, we gotta check your number. He's like, my mom works here. Like, how y'all don't know me, right? But shit like that is real shit in that community, because depending on status, situations, the various ways, the history of the federal government's engagement, and engagement might be a soft word, treatment. They done put, you got all kinds of like folks that, clearly of that community, but then it's like, well, according to the paperwork, you ain't in the community, or, all these other things. So you may not be able to access things that you should be able to access because of someone else's declaration and determination, similarly, to the way we all deal with the powers of the state and the powers of that be, so to speak, to access the world and to display that, where at least if you're looking, right, I'm sure some people that might flew over their head, may not, I don't know. But then also it's like, it's a story. Like it ain't, we're not here to have a 40-minute, like, terrible state of the medical system. You know what I mean? It's
right. But that's what I'm saying. I think they gave it to us in a way that's like, hey, this is a thing. And it's and we're almost normalizing it so that it's surreal and almost just like, oh, that's what it is at the same time, which I think sometimes is good for people because I think repeated ideas of like, do you see how bad this is? Do you see how bad this is? Right? It's kind of like that's a short-term strategy where I think them just showing you, yes, there are people here, and you're coming in to get treatment, and they're looking for sicknesses that ain't there, right? Like, okay, you know what I mean? So you kind of get a look at how lopsided and surreal it really is, and I thought it did a really good job of, and it does a really good job of doing that. Another thing I want to touch on was and is the culture conversation. And I know you and I have had this conversation of like, there's sometimes where you can think of culture and, if you Black and you like, okay, this is, and sometimes you might think of things as Black culture. Right? And you may there's a variety of things that we take as Black culture, I think, for a variety of reasons. And you may not recognize that there are cultures formed out of isolation, marginalization that you might call Black, but ain't Black in itself, right? And so even much of what you see, in the behaviors and some of the activities, which might mimic things that people may attach to Black culture, you know what I'm saying? I think it's really interesting to watch, that on there. And then, also to your point of like, okay, there's Wu-Tang everywhere, right? It's all this stuff, my man's Pop was a rapper, right? With big chains on. But then you're thinking it's like this, but then you're listening and talking about the role of Native men versus Native women, and Native men going away and Native women having to like stay and keep the community. Which I think we often think that the only people that happened to in the world was Black folks.
Right.
Where men will go and do something and women have to stay and hold, quote unquote, hold down the fort. And that's, the terminology be damned. But like, so I just think it's important that it shows some cultural context that I think we can forget about, or even, the group of the kids that's like Crips, right? Because obviously Crips started from LA culture, but it's not germane just to LA culture no more. And it's not germane just to Black folks.
Yeah.
And seeing that.
Yeah. And then I think it shows, to me, it touches on that. Obviously it's built into the name, but the reality that once things are out in the world, once ideas are out in the world and they're flowing around, people pick up on what they pick up on. And also similarly situated people sometimes pick up on similar things and go, oh, that seems like something, you could adapt that to our situation, or, it fits in this way, or, you know what I'm saying? The rapping brothers that keep everybody informed of what's happening in the streets. You know what I'm saying? That they ride on they chromed out, lowrider banana suit Jones. You know what I'm saying? Like, though that's a special set of brothers, man. Like but it's like it's something that you would know, right? Maybe from your community, but it's within the form, how they came to that, the sort of that manifestation, that understanding, and it's a opportunity to not a world we're all the same, not that, but that we have similar things, right? And then also even the sort of, everybody got disaffected youth, you know what I'm saying? Like, kids don't want to be here, kids want to be over there. I don't like this place, I'm upset with this. You got family stuff going on. You know what I mean? You got certain families even within the community that are a little more, stable or whatever have you. But the also showing sort of the different ways, due to the way gender and what have you plays out in our society, that it plays out differently in their community, right? And I would really, I enjoyed the show, but also it's like not just as like spectacle, so to speak, but like as right. Like I feel like I'm touching base. I'm also being entertained. You know what I mean? Like with my man's in the first, he get lumped up and he keep going like, I got some good ones in though. You know what I'm saying? Like you got jumped, fam. Like what you talking about? If you ever, been jumped or had a friend that been jumped, they gotta do something to sort of save your own character. Like, yeah, man, they jumped on me, man. But I got a couple ones in there. You know what I'm saying? I touched a couple of them, I think I got my man in the eye one time, right? Like, right. But he was going back to that for multiple days. Like, yeah, I got some good ones in. You know what I'm saying? Like that is it's a specific response, for him, for the character, but it also is a response like, yeah, I can see somebody doing that. Like, even if they wasn't, my man's, out in the res in Oklahoma, like if you got lumped up, you'd be trying to find
start telling people, right? You start telling people, start framing it for spinning it. Like, hey, no, I was in it too. And everybody's like, man, you wasn't in it. You got beat up. It is what it is. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? And so no, but I think that that whole, the longing for fatherhood, like all that kind of stuff, which, like you said, it's not that we're all the same, but the factors in America of white supremacy, of racism, the confluence of all these things can produce similar outcomes in different communities.
Mm-hmm.
But because we don't see it, because of that erasure, we think, and this is for Black folks, we think we're the only ones who have those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up thinking that we have some sort of lock on dysfunction, right? We think that we have a lock on the engagement that has happened because of these confluence of these systems. And I think the show brings it to bear. It's like, no, when a variety of things has happened to a people, and especially what has happened to Native people in this country, you're going to get some, not just challenging outcomes and like this ain't good times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to get some things that happen while people are living their lives. So, for me, to your point, it gave I think an insight with some real character to like, this is a community, and letting a community being seen how it defines itself versus us trying to do Native History Month or, try to talk about all the bad things that are happening, which neither paint people in their humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes we rob people of their humanity by trying to present the picture that we think is the best for people to see, whether it's all good or all bad.
Yeah. Indeed.
Plus, old head with the weed is hilarious.
Oh yeah, that's
the episode. My man, he done unearthed some weed and think that he gonna sell it like it's antique, like that marijuana gets cannabis. The cannabis gets better over time.
Like this is vintage. This is a vintage cannabis. Like,
yeah, like you know what I mean. He realized that it's a rocket fuel out here. Ain't nobody trying to smoke that, man. This is a rocket fuel ready to go out these parts.
And he dug it out like he dug it out the yard. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, yeah, let me go take me into town. You know what I'm saying? I'll go get this money, then I'll make my next move. But it's like, yo, man, situation, times have changed, man. Like, everybody trying to get your old man weed. They got a whole store with weed in it.
But I thought that was a beautiful telling of someone who's like, hey, listen, I'm keeping to the way I was doing stuff. And so here's who I am and here's who I've been. But the world is kind of like, yo, that's who you are and that's cool, but we're at a different place, which again, I think is a universal theme of any community where someone's like, here's how we used to do it. And the world's like, yes, but we kind of moved on past that space. So no, definitely anyone, those listeners, please check it out. I think it's definitely worth your time, not only on a learning level, but it's just funny too.
It's funny. It's like, it's a good show.
It's a good show, yeah.
It's a good show.
Like we didn't ask you to go watch a documentary. It's a good show.
Right. And don't, well, I'll just say it. Don't feel like you need to go do some sort of penance by watching like a documentary, a documentary or some other sad, like, I gotta watch something serious about the community so I can, be ready so I can laugh. It's okay to enjoy it. Like, it's a comedic show. Like, you're supposed to find some joy and some laughs in what they're doing.
Right.
And the only thing else I guess I just wanted to touch on too, though, was the importance from an infrastructure perspective is that, and I'm, I haven't been able to do a lot of reading, but, I imagine some of if you watch the show, there's folks that are on the show that are performers, actors that you've seen in other things where they didn't necessarily get to be themselves in terms of culturally in whatever you've seen them in before. You know what I'm saying? They was ambiguous, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, and person of ambiguous origin, you know, character actor or, you know, was it, I was trying to remember, was it actor talking about, you know, maybe I think it was like a one of the Middle Eastern communities, maybe I think it was Lebanese actor talking about playing, you know, everything from, you know, a Bedouin or a Moroccan to like basically whatever you think these people look like, they slot me in. Like I'll never get to be myself in the movie, you know what I'm saying? Or a person from where I'm from, you know what I'm saying? And so I could imagine for many of these performers having the opportunity to be actually in your cultural space, you know, in your culture, in your work, you know what I'm saying, is dope, you know what I'm saying? And I guess I'm as a proponent of, I'd like to see more, you know what I'm saying? I'd like to see, you know, more stories, you know, coming out of that community and a community similarly situated. Because, you know, you know, it's a good thing to see people. So that's all I'll say on that. And then if you got something else.
No.
Pivot.
So we're gonna pivot.
So in other news, the phenomenon of the Verzuz is the content creation that just keeps on giving. After, I guess, I don't know the timing of the sequence, but somewhere between
it was after the Fat Joe. It was
song,
after
Puffy and Jermaine Dupri, and so either somebody said it or somebody called Puffy. I don't know exactly where it started.
It was Fat Joe, Puff, Snoop, and JD on a 4-way Instagram live or some shit.
Yeah. And Puffy just basically goes all the way in on how like they made Dupri can't fuck with him. It's hilarious. I guess first I'll just give you a chest pass. Like what the hell you think about that?
So I mean, so it's actually interesting. I think like most things in the world, to actually talk about it, you have to talk a little bit about what comes before it, so it can make sense, right? Like, so you got the Ja Rule and Fat Joe Verzuz, which I think most people thought was going to be disappointing after the Dipset Locks one. So clearly Fat Joe tried to use the Jadakiss and Locks model against against Ja Rule, which I think one thing people can forget, if you're a certain age and under, Ja Rule was like your high school music, right? Ja Rule had the 3 or 4 years, which might have defined your high school time. And guess what? You're 33 now, 34, right. If that happened, right? If you went to school anywhere from 99 or 2000 to 2003 or 4, Ja Rule was like the soundtrack to your childhood. Yeah. We can forget that, right? For us, he was the guy that was on Mike Geronimo's song, right, or some shit, Cash Money Click. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and so it was kind of like, okay, and was the guy rap with Jay-Z and DMX on some songs. But if you're somebody else, millions of people, Ja Rule was like your 8th grade dance, your prom thing. And I think we downplayed that. And I think Ja Rule, to his credit, did not allow us to downplay that he had a really hot...
He had a run.
He had a run, right? And Fat Joe tried to use, I think, his things that no one thought were strengths to his benefit. But again, that's like us talking about listening to Flo Joe and Represent, right? And like these songs from like 1993, when you would go over to the shopping center over in Willingboro to get the tape. Or I'd go to King James or go downtown in Philly to get the tape. So it's like, that ain't gonna ring well, because even the difference of when... Now, this is Fat Joe's hits notwithstanding, which he has a lot of them. But even the time that Fat Joe was doing like the hardcore mixtape hip hop was different than when Jadakiss and them was doing it, because Jadakiss and them was still doing it towards the end of the 90s, where Fat Joe and Pun's time was 97, 95, 96 through 98, right? Like, even though those times are close to each other, they're different in who listened. So anyway, basically, Fat Joe, I think generally speaking, people say Fat Joe lost or whatever. But Fat Joe being this really interesting kind of like representative of like, kind of hip hop via his shows and all that. Yeah, he's one of the few people that can get Diddy, Ja Rule, Diddy, Jermaine Dupri, and Snoop all on something to talk. And then Diddy just started being Diddy. He had that reflective time and shit after everything has happened to him, which I respect. But clearly, he's back to being Puff now.
Right.
He's clearly back to being Puff and told him, your arms are too short to box with me, motherfucker. You know what I mean? And, I guess what I'll start and then, please, is I think there's something interesting here about an impresario versus an actual producer. Mm-hmm. And I think hip hop has blurred these lines in like 3 or 4 different ways of like who can do a verses and what belongs to you versus what belongs to somebody else, right? Because Puff and Puff and also Dr. Dre, they're people who have been producers in the broadest sense of the term, right? We know that there were some other that for Puff and Dr. Dre that there were some other, knob turners, right? Yeah. There were some people who actually did the thing. Mm-hmm. And then, Puff all the way, and then Dr. Dre to some degree would come in and make it the thing, right? Mm-hmm. He would make it the thing, and then it would be the thing. With Jermaine Dupri, while you may argue not having some of the sheen and all-encompassing, like dominating music that you would think from both of those, because Diddy said the only person he can go against is Dr. Dre. Jermaine Dupri is unique in that he actually produced the thing. Right. like he actually turned the knob himself. Right. And I think so, thinking about Black music and what that means of like just a person that says, hey, I'm a producer versus the person who actually told you to change the pitch and like, rearrange the melody, is a different, unique thing. So just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, like, it's almost like the difference between being the person who like conceived and constructed the song. Like you think taking it to a different era, but like Quincy Jones could play the instruments, can write the music, and piece together the parts, can, you know what I'm saying? Like, so you're like, oh man, Quincy Jones, man. And you may or may not be aware of how much music Quincy Jones is responsible for its creation. Right. Puffy ain't Quincy Jones. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like now, but Puff, now what I will give Puff credit for, Puffy got an ear quite clearly, right? And somehow within his own art tapped into a pulse to be able to listen to what, to one, assemble people, which he deserves credit for. And then to see where like you have a song that is going to transcend its genre to a degree, right? It's going to become a hit outside of just the people who already like that kind of music. You know what I'm saying? So, to the degree that it, despite his untimely death, that Biggie, could transcend out of sort of hip hop, right? To just being like, oh yeah, like everybody knows Biggie, Notorious B.I.G. Like, right. There ain't necessarily a reason that you would listen to Juicy and love it if you wasn't like us. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't totally know how you feel the same about Juicy as I feel about Juicy. You know what I'm saying? Or you know what I mean? What's the joint on the second record?
More Money, More Problems.
Yeah, like More Money, More Problems. He's on like whatever he, Puffy tapped into creatively to understand how to. Even from Uptown, like in Mary J. Blige and sort of the, kind of pushing the I don't know, we wouldn't consider Mary J. Blige New Jack Swing. What is that? What is that?
What kind of music is that? That's an interesting point. There's a space of, it's not New Jack Swing, but it was the precipice of, I think we started to have hip hop influenced R&B before we had R&B influenced hip hop.
Yeah.
So I think New Jack Swing was not necessarily. New Jack Swing wasn't hip hop influenced R&B. It was just the sound of the time, done by Teddy Riley, one of the best producers ever to do anything.
Right.
Then Diddy takes what he's hearing on Uptown mixtapes, right? Essentially, he's taking a very Harlem like a thing, and then took Harlem and then sold it to you.
Yeah.
Right, and sold you the thing that was happening on Ron G mixtapes as a new music.
Mm-hmm.
And so then went from doing hip hop influenced R&B to R&B influenced hip hop.
Right.
You know, which again, I think there is a genius there, right? There's a genius there that's not X's and O's, I guess is the way I would express it, because I think Jermaine Dupri's stuff is like an X and O guy and some other genius, not necessarily transcendent genius, but like
damn good
and fascinating, right? Because to come up and to be a dancer with Houdini, and sometimes I think we forget about him. Right. He was a dancer with Houdini, then becomes a producer, takes two kids and creates, I would argue, some of the first marketable pop hip hop, right? Then finds the Brat, then finds Usher, right? Like, I think we can forget what this guy did, right? You know, I mean, both of them, I think, you know, their success can be obscured. So I think he's a really an amazing, you know, X's and O's guy that also has had deep cultural impact, where Diddy's like all cultural impact, really no X's and O's.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? He's not X's and O's, you know, he gets with J-Lo, and then by the time Jermaine Dupri got with Janet Jackson, I think her star was a little bit on the wane. So, you know, even though he went and got him a superstar woman too, right? You know, it was just kind of a little different when it was happening. You know, so I do think it's just different in what they actually do, which is where the comparison, and I think it's just a thing in our music where some of this is just difficult to measure.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, if you put Diddy and Jermaine Dupri together, Diddy never produced none of the songs, but they're all Puff songs, right? So if you play any Biggie stuff, okay, is that Puff?
Right. Do you get to get credit for all of them?
Does he get credit for every song Big actually did? Does he get credit for every song 112 did? Does he get credit for every song that he did take that on? Like, you know, what does he get credit for? Versus what does Jermaine Dupri get credit for? Because he was actually in the studio.
Right.
Yeah,
and I imagine that there's some Jermaine Dupri touched work that you may not know that was Jermaine Dupri was on that. Yeah, he was one of them. If you look at the credits, if you look at the liner notes, you know what I'm saying? He's one of the producers on that album, on this song, on that. I mean, that's the impression I get. And you know, and I'll admit that I like some of their works. You know, they were not necessarily my, you know, I mean, like, you know, at the times of some, it might be considered their pinnacle. I'm not sure. You know, they was also sort of like, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the real hip hop. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I was right. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you know what I mean? I'm not, the main I can make it R&B. You know what I'm saying? All right, that's cool. But I don't know the extent of his.
Which is weird because okay, Usher's Confession album. Okay, so how are we supposed to judge if Jermaine Dupri produced Confessions?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is that compared to? Only You by 112? I don't know, Victory. On, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, to some degree, it is just different. Again, do you give Puff the credit for the whole first and second album of Mary J. Blige? Right? Can he just play them? Can he just play every Mary J. Blige song that he was influenced on? You know?
Right.
So
right. Now he don't get no Jodeci credit, do he?
But he should.
I guess he do, right?
He should get all of Jodeci, at least the first album, first and second album. He should get all of the first album, so the 4 songs that was good on the second album, You know, like he gets all of that. Do you give him Diddy? You give him all of Mace? I mean, you get Biggie. Do you give him all of Mace?
Mm-hmm.
Do you give him every Bad Boy remix that ever came out? Right?
Yeah,
Do you play Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, ODB because it was a Bad Boy remix?
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, that's where it gets, I think, kind of complicated. And I think the origin story of like creation and what you're responsible for, because the person that I connect closest to Diddy is actually like Berry Gordy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not Quincy Jones, right?
Yeah.
Quincy Jones did a whole bunch, and then Quincy Jones became a broader kind of producer, like on the Michael Jackson stuff, right? Like,
right.
Because there was a whole bunch of people in there during that time, Rod Temperton and all that kind of stuff. But he clearly was the motivator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where Jermaine Dupri kind of, to me, would be closer to an actual Quincy Jones.
Right. Where he's arranging and writing.
Right. He's writing, right. He actually wrote the shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Of a variety of different genres. Because then you still got to give him Welcome to Atlanta. You still got to give him other stuff that he's been involved with recently, right? Mm-hmm. You still got to give the guy the creation of Bow Wow for whatever matters there, right? So,
Bow Wow.
Yeah. So you got to give this guy all of that. So I would see him as closer to Quincy Jones and Diddy almost closer to like, you know, Berry Gordy getting with Diana Ross, right? Like he is not the in-house Motown band of producers, right? He is the person that saw the vision and gave the feel for what it meant to be Motown, just like Diddy took. And again, I think he's a genius. He constantly repackages Harlem as he understands it and gives it to you.
Mm-hmm.
He constantly gives you this the Black excellence thing, you know, where, you know, shout out to Andre Harrell, who really, I think, created it and Puff ran with it, right?
Right.
As he should have, because they were close, but
yeah.
I'm going to repackage. I gave you Harlem in 92. I'll give you Harlem again. If I'm hanging out with A$AP Ferg and A$AP Rocky, they'll give you Harlem again. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. Created a whole album called Money Making Mitch about Harlem, right? Again, in like 2013, right? Like he just, so yeah, I think they're different. And that's why I think the Verzuz kind of gets difficult because the people we think we should be comparing often are not the same. You know, again, Dre and Diddy would kind of make sense because you do know that there were other people that produced stuff, but he was the executive producer, right? Yeah. Like he would get credit for some stuff Daz probably produced. He would get credit for some stuff, for example, from Pittsburgh context, that Mailman and Butter produced, right? Mm-hmm. He, you know, when you hear the drums come in on, you know, Explosive and all that kind of stuff, we know he didn't actually create the song. Right. It was on a Dr. Dre album.
Yep.
And same way for Diddy, where I think Jermaine Dupri is kind of and I'm not saying that they're the same, but if you were going to have a comparison, it would actually be more to what's his name? To Teddy Riley.
Yeah. That would be more.
You know what I mean?
That's nice.
Yeah. So, but the shit is just the fact that you know, Puffy is 50-something years old, still yelling at people, talking about you can't mess with me. Like, you know what I mean? Like all of our seriousness and what we just tried to talk about with music notwithstanding. The funny thing here is that he's still like that.
Right. He's still like, no, you can't even know me.
Like, he's still yelling at him. I love you, man, but you can't fuck with me. Whoa.
Like, damn, fam. Like, don't chill at all, I suppose.
I will see. I think it'll be interesting, and I think Swiss and Timbaland have an interesting challenge of like the cadence of these, because I think the Locks Dipset one was so culturally profound. Like they were reaching these highs with like Beanie Man and, you know, the Beanie Man and what's the name? They were reaching all these interesting highs, and then it was like Locks and Dipset, and people were kind of like, oh, okay, Locks and Dipset doing all mixtape songs. Let's see how this goes. And then, you know, man turns into top 5 dead or alive performance, right? So that now your expectation of everything to come is going to be like, are you going to try to do what the Locks did?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's, so unless you get people together who really don't have no edge on it, then, so I think it's going to be an interesting thing. I think it will be difficult probably to get either Dr. Dre or Diddy to do it, Puff to do it, just because in some ways it signals a loss, right? In some ways, if someone perceives as you taking a loss, like it helps your streaming, but that becomes a cultural thing that at least you're going to wear for at least a year or so, right? Like you're not going to wear it forever. Our culture, like, pop culture moves too fast, so you're not going to wear it forever.
Yeah.
But you're going to wear it.
Yeah, you will. It will at least get fitted for size. You know what I'm saying? And you'll have a time where people go, oh yeah, man, he did lose that Verzuz though. You know what I'm saying?
But that was well done, just fitted for size. That was,
man.
Oh man.
Now every once in a while or something, maybe it's pop in there. You know how it goes.
Hit it out the park, man.
Yeah, I mean, like it also says I'm trying to think of the logistics of that performance. Like I don't really know how you like there's such a wide band of what could end up being played. And then it's like could they only play the ones where they do at least a cameo?
Right.
They gotta do so just the ones that's like, be all of their hits. I mean, I know for sure the logistics of like all the different performers, the different echelons that they've worked with, showing up is that's not gonna happen.
Right. So it's like you're just playing a song. Right. So that's like, okay, you just play the song. Is it, just what happens there? You know what I mean? And that's that competition versus collaboration thing, which I think, again, everyone kind of started moving towards oh man, this is collaboration. Earth, Wind & Fire versus Isley Brothers. This is great. You know what I mean? And then the Locks and Dipset joint just kind of threw that out the window. Like, no, we're back to fighting. Yeah. You know what I mean? Collaboration over confrontation.
This is a head to head.
Yeah, this ain't even just competition. This is confrontation, right? And so, again, that's going to be an interesting twist. So I just think it, like most things in the world, kind of like the eternal conversation of, is LeBron James better than Michael Jordan, right? Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things where, people are in different lanes. And although you heard them on the radio, that doesn't mean you have to judge them towards each other because they're just different, right? Like, it's like saying, who's the best rapper? And are you saying who's had the best set of verses ever versus who has had the best commercial success, influence, etc. Right? Because if you're just saying who is the best rapper, then I'm going to go to someone who's never had a bad song. Right? The best rapper alive to me is Black Thought. If you were to use that context. Right. Never had a bad verse, never, you know what I mean? Never less than is influential. But that's not what you really mean, right? You really have a broader set of things that you're saying. So I think in that way, the versus collaboration concept, just because a lot of these folks are so unique in their attributes of perfection, as Shaheed would say, we should just, let them be them. But if they can get Puff on a joint to just see the shenanigans, I'm willing to watch Puffy be on Verzuz. I'll shut everything else down and watch that shit. The things that would happen with him doing that, oh man.
He's still gonna be up there dancing the same way.
Oh man.
Like, you know what I mean? Curse people out. And it's also, I guess, a testament to the, we grow, we mature, we change many aspects of our behavior sometimes. But there's certain parts of us sometimes that, it's still in there. It's still in there. You know what I'm saying? Because of people out talking all crazy for no particular reason. That's who the band is. Like, so I appreciate it. It's hilarious though. This be, and again, I think it's just the piece that like we all know somebody that to talk wild to people. And you might think, oh, they gonna change, and then they be like, nah, he might still talk about, they might still cuss somebody out or just, whatever the case may be. So I'll definitely watch it myself. You know what I'm saying? I'd be curious, hopefully if I remember when it's coming on, I still got the same problem that I don't ever know when the damn thing's coming on. And it's always, if it is West Coast time, like, oh man, the verse is on right now. I'm like, oh, it's on right now? Damn.
Right, the verse is on 6 o'clock.
I'm still doing something else.
Right.
Like I can't.
I'm still right, yeah. Verse is on, right. Verse came on 5 o'clock. Pacific Standard Time.
On a Tuesday. Like I'm doing something else at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, man. Like, I can't watch the verse.
No, that's real. That's real.
But in any event, I mean, I think we covered anything for the good of the order.
No, man. I think we covered it all for the day.
All right. So with that, go, if you're listening, go check out Reservation Dogs. You know what I'm saying? Send feedback. Also, maybe take your own self on a trip down to the Puffy, Jermaine Dupri, road, see what you come up with. But in any event, be safe. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Thank you to you for listening. You can always support the podcast by sharing, rating, and subscribing wherever you listen. And also by, as I always say, becoming a patron on Patreon. Just search up Justice Rajee and podcast. I did make some changes there and pre-work and where I'm trying to go with this. So if you look it up, become a subscriber, save me, help offset some of the costs it costs to make time to create. Got a lot in the works and in development. Looking into the next month. So in anything and all things, please check out Reservation Dogs. If this Puffy Jermaine Dupri thing comes to be, that would be entertaining to see how they pull that off. Hopefully I will remember to actually catch it. Me and Verzuz don't ever be on the same schedule. But in any event, please be safe. We're heading towards, some places at least some election season coming in November. So tune in. If where you at, something's on deck. Get involved. But everything, man. Winter's coming. We got to get through fall, but with the cold weather, please be safe. Get you a good coat, and we'll save the best part for later, another time. So, thank you for listening once again. Peace.